This episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. The Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilly.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard. And you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give
up. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Devin Shelton of Emery. This was a fun one. I know I've had Toby on. I know I've had Matt on for a really interesting conversation. And this was one of those where I've had the guys come through and play my house a couple of times and do a live podcast and all that. So I've gotten to know Matt and Toby pretty well over the last couple of years, plus just kind of the online correspondence that we have. But Devin's always kind of been the outlier of the group and not really one that I've, I guess, taken my own time to get to know through the same ways that I have Matt and Toby. But it's one of those where I feel like Devin has such a great voice. I think he's from when I hear him on the Bad Christian podcast and so forth, I think he's really funny, but he's kind of like that guy who like sits back and waits for his chance to be funny. Because I think when you have Matt and Toby, who are kind of the bigger personalities, it's often easy to be overshadowed at times. And I feel like that's kind of not the role that Devin plays, but I think he kind of fits this idea that I've been working my way through lately, where, you know, I've come to the realization that people like sports. You know, sports is one of those things where, like basketball I'll use, where you might not be the guy that, you know, is leading your team to victory. You're scoring all the points, you're doing all the things when you need that last second bucket to like beat someone, like, oh, I'm the guy, I'm gonna take it. But you need those role players, and those role players are so invaluable. You know, they're the people that help boost morale. They're the people that kind of do the intangibles that allow the team to be super successful. And I think Devin is that person in the band. You know, I think he has kind of realized where he is needed and facilitates those things so everyone can be successful in the band and has their opportunity to shine. And I know that's kind of a weird way to say it because it almost makes it sound like someone's not as important. But I think that's the thing when you... Because I'm that person, I feel like, in my life. I feel like I set other people up to be successful, to have, you know, to be the person that I see them, the potential in them to be, and help facilitate those things to allow them to achieve those things. I realize I do it in my marriage. It's one of those where, and that's kind of where I kind of got the concept was, you know, roles that people have in their relationships are not necessarily as defined or may not be what they seem from the outside. And it's when you kind of start picking those apart and kind of seeing like, oh, I think the healthiest relationships and the ones that work the best are when someone understands how to facilitate for others and play their role and do it really well and help people and help everyone achieve maximum success. And when I kind of started thinking about that leading up to my chat with Devin, I realized he kind of was that person in the band from my perspective. But I also don't know a whole lot about him because, like I said, I just haven't had the opportunity to talk to him one-on-one like this. And so I was really excited to. So let's get into my conversation with Devin, and I'll talk to you all on the other side of it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Have you had that happen once, or at this point where you've?
Oh yeah, probably many times. Yeah.
It's always one of those too that like when it does happen, when you don't hit record, you're like, man, this is going so great. Like everything, this is a great conversation. Yeah. Or like I guess more to the point, if you're recording for like musical stuff, that was it. That was the take, and then you look like, oh shit, I didn't get that.
Yeah, with recording songs, it's like all the time.
Yeah. Well, I always joke because like one of my, it's only because I think like I've just never have heard any other producer get called out for this, but like Adam D from Killswitch, one of my favorite stories about recording any band that's recorded with him is like he essentially kind of makes fun of you. Like Phil from All That Remains is like, yeah, you're in the vocal booth and you just like see Adam in his chair basically with his back to you, and you just kind of see him like this because he's laughing at you because of how bad the take is, or he'll just like hit the thing to like go into your in-ears or whatever. He'll be like, nope, do it again. And that's you're just funny. Like, I feel like that's the funnier way to do it, but I've also just never heard someone being so like brutally honest with just like, that ain't it, man, do that again.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, we've definitely had experiences with our first engineer, producer, Ed Rose. He was very serious, and he wasn't mean about it, but he would, you knew when he thought it was a bad take. So he was pretty honest and just down to business. I mean, there was no joking around with him. It was like 8 to 5 every day, get it done, I'm out.
Sometimes like, I don't know, like I mean, it's been so many decades now of like hearing people like how recording used to be, even going back to like the 50s and 60s and so forth, where like, bands kind of won, kind of like how you have been doing actually, like your live records and even this last one where it's literally all done in the studio at the same time with everybody. Yeah. But I feel like, you hear the pros and cons of like, yes, getting in a room, jamming with people because everyone knew their shit forward and backwards. Like, it was go in, get it done because you didn't have money or time to waste.
Right.
And then now you have it to where it's kind of on the opposite side of things where, with a lot of these software and programs and plugins and so forth, you have all the time in the world and it doesn't take you very long. Like you can write your part at your leisure. But I don't know if, you're one of the few that's kind of been ensconced in both, as the times have changed. Do you prefer one over the other, or do you think there's pros or cons to each?
I don't know that I have a preference. I would say probably now the way things are done now is it's obviously easier. Mm-hmm. With not to rub some dirt on it, but like, let's just say the way we do, typical recordings as a band is since we don't all live in the same location, everything is kind of on the internet. So, Dropbox Cloud, we have sessions that everybody works in, the same shared sessions. And so, if Matt or Chris are doing like a demo or they're doing the scratch takes, and then we have Dave do the drums, me and Toby jump in and, do vocals from our own basement from this room here. And so everything is super easy at your convenience when you can do it. And there's really no real strong differences in quality. I mean, probably a extremely trained producer ear could hear some differences, in maybe room quietness or whatever, but ultimately there's no differences. And so, but when when you're doing it, like rub some dirt on it, like we did this new record, or in the beginning, even, like you said, you're on time constraints and you have to get the best take you can get in a very short period of time. And so like when we recorded The Week's End, and The Question, even, it's like, hey, you guys with the Week's End, especially, we had 10 days. And so we had enough money to pay for 10 days. And so we would literally go in at 8 in the morning. We stayed above the studio. We'd go in at 8 in the morning, work till 5 every day. And, the last day or two, the last probably 3 hours of the recording on the last Friday, we spent screaming our heads off trying to get all the screaming done. So it's like, that's not really fun. I mean, it's fun to look back on it and the nostalgia of it and all that. But in the moment, you're like, okay, we got to get this done. This is serious. With Rub Some Dirt on it, it was similar in a way. We had 12 cameras. We had paid all these people to be there. The audio set up, ready to go. It's like, hey, we can make mistakes. We can redo it if we need to, but we're on a time crunch here and we have to get it done and as best as possible. So it's a little, it makes you nervous and it's, there's some anxiety involved, but there's a feeling of excitement and some of that energy that you have in those moments. It is captured on the audio that is there, you know what I mean? And you can hear it. And so that's probably the biggest difference to me.
I think that's like the hard thing, and something I actually feel kind of maybe lends itself, at least to you guys, wanting to do, a little live record. Because I feel like, demoitis is a thing. People are so enamored when they first write something and they're still, the inspirations are still so strong there that by the time you're demoing it to death, and then by the time you go to a studio to record it, like maybe that same energy and passion's not there. Yeah. And I feel like there's a little bit more sense of immediacy to it. Like it feels like this had to come out of us at this specific time, because if it didn't, then like it wouldn't exist this way. And I feel like that's been something as I've been kind of going back through and listening to like the, as we both have God, I'm terrible at doing the opposite thing. There we go. As we both have this in our backgrounds.
Oh yeah.
You guys, re-recorded this. And I feel like there's even a bit of that where, you guys have been living with some of these songs for, in some instances, 2 decades or so. And I feel like there's things maybe you do now to the songs that like, oh, this blends better into this, or this allows us to sit in a better vocal range, or, just, being better musicians and kind of changing things up to make it interesting for yourself. But I feel like there's maybe a bit of trepidation because, well, everyone knows this one way that this exists.
Right. And
by changing that, it's like rewriting history, or like changing something that I feel like just in and of itself, that's got to be scary to even go back and retackle those old songs and redo them and put it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little scary, but it's exciting for us, because like going back to when COVID kind of locked us all down and, everybody starts doing digital shows and all that. We took that as a kind of a cool opportunity, not to only have like live stream shows to sell tickets and all that stuff, but we saw it as an opportunity to be able to redo some of these things. Because when you look back on those records, a lot of times the records are brand new in your mind. The songs are new. In some instances, you're still learning the songs. I mean, you're not super comfortable with the vocal parts or this, different instruments that you're playing on it. And so, that hesitation to some degree, or tentativeness, I guess is the word, can also kind of bleed through sometimes, and so having played, The Week's End and The Question and all these albums for so many years, like you said, now you have a way of doing it, and some things are slightly different that you play live, and the energy is different and you feel differently about a part. And so being able to do those again was awesome. And I feel like, when we did those records again live, to me, I like them better because they feel like there's a new, refreshed, unique energy to them that I had never heard before, other than maybe when we play them live and they have a certain feeling. And so I can understand from a fan's perspective, like, oh, this is and for me, there's probably lots of albums that I would hear live versus the record. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that original is so nostalgic. It's just a part of who I am. And so I can understand that. But at the same time, I think giving them a little bit of new life is really cool that we can do that and kind of add to the life of the song. I think that's a kind of a cool element to music. So,
as you were kind of talking about the nostalgic experience attached for both you as the musician and us, as fans, kind of made me think of this question. I'm still kind of trying to figure out how to ask, but is it hard for you to exist in, I guess, mainly from the perspective of the fans, I guess, where you exist in these 2 to 3 year increments chronologically, and people only sort of know of you based on, I got into you when I'm Only a Man came out, so you're that Devin, or you're then the Devin 2 years later when the next record comes out. Is it kind of weird to exist to people in a capacity that's not really a linear time fashion, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is strange in many ways, and we all have people that we think of that way, right? I mean, you just have, musicians, probably actors, authors, whatever the case might be. You have people that you listen to or look up to in a way that you have them on a timeline. You have them on a story, an arc, as you might say. And so understanding that, I mean, I get it. It's not like it doesn't bother me, or it's nothing that I would be offended by in any way, but it is interesting that the relatively small amount of fame or popularity that we've had relative to many, many people is funny, because even experiencing some of those things, that you have people that have expectations of you that are a little bit unrealistic, or the way people talk to you about songs, or the way, why can't you do it this way anymore, or play, write these songs again, or this style. It's like, well, I mean, what do you expect people to do? I mean, people are going to change and be different. And there's so many different layers to humans anyway, especially if you're talking about art and making all these different things. And so I think, it's just a fine line of like understanding how people feel about those things, and people and artists in general, and then how you live your life and accept those things. If, those, we never take ourselves too seriously. And so it's always like just kind of any serious or condescending attitude that someone has towards who we are now versus then, or somewhere along the way, and they hated a certain album or a song. How could you ever write that? It's like, well, you just kind of have to let it roll off your back, because it just is what it is. And there's no real depth to those types of comments or opinions of who you are. So
I feel like you guys collectively as a band, but I'll kind of, I guess, speak more to you, Devin, or I mean, Jesus, I am talking to Devin. I'm so used to saying Matt and Toby, and then Devin is the third one. So, yep. But when kind of referring to the three of you, because of you, how often you do like the podcast and do a lot of, live things and so forth, it feels kind of at times daunting to do something like this, because I'm like, God, like you guys talk about so much. What is there really left to talk about that you haven't really touched on? But I feel like it's almost in that sometimes I feel like, when I won't say prepping, but that is the word I want to use, in prepping for this, it was kind of interesting to think of, the band's career, how many things you've done that at the time was so different. Like, we'll look at like I'm Only a Man, when that record came out, I remember, like, because I wasn't really a fan of the band, but I remember being friends with so many people that were, and hearing everyone just be so bummed. And then it was like, when I finally got into the band through my wife, I was like, this record's so fucking good. And everyone's like, oh, that's the worst one. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The songwriting on this, like just how different it is. Like, this is really adventurous, fun writing. And I feel like you guys have taken sort of that we don't have to be any one thing. We can be kind of whatever we want to be, not only in your music, but in a lot of the other things that you've done as people, like with the podcast, with, starting, the label at times, doing, a lot of the things you do, that I feel like, for me, it's so interesting to see you guys be so adventurous so far into a career, when admittedly you guys are all like, oh, we never really achieved this level, or like we would get close and then, the bottom would drop out or whatever. To just have that awareness, I guess, but that it never jaded you, I think has been remarkable and interesting to see the journey, especially over, I'd say, the last 10 years or so, maybe 15, or at least that I've really been aware of it. How has that been for you to kind of traverse, especially because you walked away for a little bit, so you kind of get to distance yourself from it and maybe look at it from a differing perspective than even Matt or Toby?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice of you to say many of those things, like we like to pride ourselves on those exact qualities as a band, I guess, and as just a group of friends or whatever part of it is if you have people around you that you trust and that you are able to work with at this capacity for this amount of time and this often, then it's like you're pretty much, you're unafraid to do anything. Like it feels like if Toby has a wacky idea, if people could see like our text threads of like just insane ideas and just all these off the wall things that we say, hey, we should do this, we should try this. It just blow your mind because we're just always thinking of all these things, and we have to really rein it in because we're like, hey, we can't do 15 of these things at one time. We just can't, because you can't devote your energy to enough energy to each one to make it good. And that's probably been our downfall in some ways, is like trying to do too many things. And so we've really been trying this year and last year. Let's really pick a few things that we're really want to focus on and really do them the best we can so that they are higher quality and maybe even have more longevity. Now, obviously, Emery and the Bad Christian Podcast, those have been the two primary things that have kind of guided and funded everything else that we do. But yeah, you're right. It's like we feel very lucky. We feel very fortunate to been able to do these things. And even when something feels like a failure or, like I'm Only a Man, even if it felt like a flop because the expectations were so high after the question, and we didn't feel like we were doing anything like that different. We knew it was different, but we weren't trying to be crazy different. We were just writing songs that we were writing. And so looking back, it's like, well, we couldn't have done anything different really. That was just what we were doing, who we are at the time. And so, and it's kind of the same, now, with podcasting and new records and continuing on after 20 plus years. It's like, if we enjoy what we're doing and we feel like there's substance to it, then we won't stop. We're going to be in our 50s, like not too far from now. And it's like, okay, or is this really what we want to be doing in our 50s? Is it something that makes sense? And so, we're always wrestling with it. It's always something that we're, throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. It's just always happening, and that'll never change, I don't think. And so Matt and Toby are the guys who, I'm a little bit more like you said, you kind of explained it to some degree. I'm kind of always around or always there involved, but I'm always kind of the guy in the middle, just trying to bring these outlandish ideas in and say, okay, what can we actually accomplish here? And I think the balance that we have is pretty tremendous and not common. So I think we're pretty lucky to have that for sure.
I think it's, I often joke, when we have access now to so many bands, and especially, that content is king between, all the socials, or if you're doing a Patreon or whatever, like just creating all these ancillary things for people to be engaged constantly with, that it's interesting that we learn that a lot of times a band, even if it's 4, 5, 6 dudes, whatever, that really it's like 1 or 2 people that are the driving force of the band, and then the rest just kind of play their parts, and then that's how it works. You guys are one of the few that it seems like legitimately everyone kind of takes a turn steering the ship in some capacity. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the fact that for the most part, you've kept practically the original lineup, especially this long, right, is, I think, very telling that it's like you guys have figured out what works best for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's the truth. It's, Matt, Toby, and myself, we, the ones that like started the band, were the original 3 members. And then we've been there obviously the whole time, except for when I took a hiatus. And even when I took a hiatus, it wasn't I shouldn't call it a hiatus. I left the band because I thought, okay, I'm going to be with my family, and I'm sure the band won't last, like too much longer, just because, it was like one of those times where the whole scene was kind of in a lull. It was like, what's really going to happen? I mean, we're going to play shows to 20 people, for 10 years. I mean, that's not going to happen. So, we've always kind of been there, whether physically or just in the headspace to some degree, especially Matt and Toby. And so with Josh and Dave, like I said, Josh has been there basically from the beginning. Dave came in a year or so after we were touring full time. And so it's basically been the same guys. And we are like, even though Toby, Matt, and myself are probably, I would say, the core in a sense of like ultimately decision makers and the ones that kind of do all that sort of thing. Dave and Josh are always active in the projects that we do. They're always there, and it's always a big thing for us to have everyone equally excited or, to be a part of something. And so I think that is important. And that's a big part of, it's obviously a huge part of our longevity. And we've never, we've been fortunate. Like, we've toured with so many bands, so many great, cool bands, and some not as cool, but and it's so crazy to me because we have experienced so many times, like you have like a prima donna in the band, or a guy who just like acts like he's the most important thing on the planet. And I'm like, how did they get to that point? Like, how did they get to the point where the other guys won't say anything, or they don't have a real friendship, or and that's probably the case, is a lot of times they're not like, maybe they're not best friends, or maybe, and I can understand, you get all this popularity and it goes to your head pretty quickly, and maybe other people feel a little intimidated or something, but we've been literally so fortunate. And I know a handful of bands that are similar that they just don't have that. Everybody in the band has always been comfortable enough to call you out on your, being stupid about something, or just being pompous, in certain situations. And we've had, knockdown drag outs about certain things before because we had to. And so, we're fortunate to be able to do those things because we have been able to kind of maintain some sort of, equality in the band that has never been broken, regardless of what you do or who you are, or, anything like that.
This might be actually, every time I say this lately, everyone's been like, there are no stupid questions. So I'll say the phrasing might be stupid.
It's all right.
It makes me wonder, and I mean, immediately I can almost count on like 2 or 3 examples where I could disprove this same thought process, but it makes me wonder if you guys growing up so heavily tied to the church and stuff like that kind of gave you that mindset to want to speak up, to call each other out. I guess instead of saying it like that, to hold each other accountable, but to also allow yourselves to grow as people within the band, within the band dynamic, because that's sort of a different set of parameters you had growing up to know that, like, well, this is just how people are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, Toby and myself grew up in a super, strict, legalistic type environment. And then, that started loosening up a little bit as we got a little older and everything. And then, I knew Matt for a long time, but Matt and I weren't super close until probably high school and all that. But Matt has, if you know Matt, or if, people who are listening know who Matt is, I mean, he's obviously one of the creators of the Bad Christian Podcast and all that. And so he's always thought a little differently than everybody else. I was probably a little bit more traditional minded, just in general. And so, having, Matt, Toby, and myself, kind of being so close for so long, and we've had all these not the conversations evolve, obviously, but conversations in the same way since, college, since early in high school. And so the openness that we've been able to kind of have with each other about those things, like why are things this way? Why does it have to be like that? Or why do people think, just kind of questioning the things that we thought was okay to question has just evolved over time. And now we see, I mean, honestly, we think there is nothing that's off limits. I mean, nothing is off limits to us. And so questioning anything, we've not only has it been like entertaining in a sense of like friends, you just have goofy conversations about anything, no matter what. But also it's like, we feel like it has given a little bit of liberty to other people. To, you know, I was like, maybe that's okay to question that, or why do I have to only think this way because of what someone told me? And so that has been a big part of Emery. You know, when we first came in as a Christian band, you know, it was much more judgmental for, you know, from fans, like, hey, you guys are on tooth and nail, so you should say Jesus on stage, or you should preach, or you should use your platform for whatever. And that burned us out pretty quickly. And so we're like, well, wait a second. I mean, why, just because we want to play music at this place, do we have to talk about Jesus? I mean, that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're doing at the time. And so that whole process of understanding the culture that we had grown up in, and then the culture that we were playing music in, that really shaped like, okay, our questions, and like, okay, how can we kind of break out of this bubble? And so, and that has obviously just, you know, continued to grow and expand over time, over the past 20 years, not only in our music, but also in what podcasting and the questions that we're asking and stuff like that. So it's played a huge part.
I think, you know, it's kind of funny because I never really thought about this until the other day when we had so we finally bought the house that we're living in, that you've been in. But we were doing our housewarming party. We had so many people coming in, you know, asking about, like, you know, does it feel different now that it's yours, and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of realized, like, there's these questions at times you get asked, like, you know, oh, does it feel different now that it's yours? And it's like, no, I've lived here for 12 years before this. It just, like, now I don't have to go to somebody else to ask for permission,
right,
to do something. Like, if I want to paint a wall, I can just paint the wall. I don't have to like double check with somebody. But it was weird because when I kind of got asked that question over and over and over again by friends and family, like, oh, doesn't it feel weird to like own this thing or to do this thing? It's kind of weird because like I said, and as the record's still sitting out, it kind of made me think about when you take ownership of something. And, you know, for a while you guys weren't on a label, you're doing everything yourselves. So it was kind of interesting when you guys announced for this one that you're going back to tooth and nail, that I was like, you know, what goes into the process when you're finally able to kind of be free, not have any constraints of someone telling you to do something. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what a label it only does. I mean, I know they do a ton of other things, but what is the mindset when you haven't had to talk to anyone other than yourselves, and now have to bring in somebody else to kind of make sure that it aligns with whatever else they're trying to do? How has that transition been?
Well, it's been great this time. I mean, you know, the first time you sign to a label, you have a different mentality. You're more protective. You know, you're a little bit more like defensive about your music or about what you're doing, and you take offense to more things. You're younger, you're more immature, and you know, you have to learn to trust that there are people out there who do know more than you about the music scene and about the industry. And so that was a learning process for us the first time. You know, you kind of have to grow into that position. And I've heard horror stories about bands on labels too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's been some really bad experiences that fortunately we haven't had. But yeah, going in and, you know, becoming our own independent band, you know, and doing all the crowdfunding stuff, that's amazing because you're free. You know, like you say, you can do anything you want, anytime you want, no matter what, and you don't have to ask any permission. And that's amazing. And I think, especially nowadays, you know, when labels have a whole different role, there's no, you know, you don't have to be on a label to get seen. You don't have to be on a label to get distributed and streaming and all that stuff. And so it's so much different now. Before, you know, you kind of needed a platform to jump off of, because otherwise the internet was kind of non-existent. You know, you couldn't really do all that stuff. And so now it's, you know, you do anything you want and be seen on TikTok 5 million times in a day. So so going independent was a very freeing feeling and idea that we had. And it was awesome for, about a decade, I guess, almost is about a decade that we were independent band, released multiple albums. And that was amazing. The problem with that is we have always been, especially being independent, DIY almost to a fault to some degree, because there are many things that kind of don't get the time or energy that they deserve, if that makes sense. So like we would do record releases and we would, do everything we could, publicity wise, we'd run ads, the things that everybody can do. But, after a month or so, it kind of just begins to slowly trickle away. And then the fans who bought it, they have it and, it's all good. And that's kind of it. So the lifespan of an album or a single or whatever is much shorter in a sense. For us, it was because we just didn't devote the time and energy and funds to continuing that. Because you used to do like an album cycle for like a year, like it would be a whole year of touring for that album, everything. And so that was a big deal. And so when we decided that Rub Some Dirt on It was a good album for us to rethink our current situation, being, totally independent, and labels not being like it was used to be. You don't sign 3, 4, 5 album deals anymore for little to no money. It's, you basically are hiring and expanding your team of marketing and distribution. Like obviously Tooth and Nail has better distribution than we would independently. They have a marketing team that does a good job, and so we were able to kind of add them to the Emery team to help us make Rub Some Dirt on It bigger than we would have made it ourselves. And so it's a totally different thing. It's just a one album thing, they're not taking all the money from the album or anything like that. It's way, way different. And we feel way more comfortable to have them on the team because that we know that they will work hard for it. And we know that it makes our job a little easier in that area.
It's interesting to go back. I guess not going back. Let me preface and change thought process real quick. So you had said something actually that you had said when you were starting to write this record that it was when you kind of wanted to make the change and maybe go back to a label. What was it about this demoing process that made you come to that realization as a group?
Well, when we didn't. So last year we recorded the album on video and audio, as I think and we released and we did like a big ticketed event and all that. And then we released the video album, the audio and the video to Emery Land, our online community. And then we even put the video on YouTube for free. We just thought this turned out really great. We're super proud of it. We want everybody to see it. And that's just what we wanted to do. And so we did that and we put it out. And then we went back and we re-sang all the vocals, did some screams again, added some guitar layers, edited bass here and there, did a few like updates like that. And then when we got the mix back, we had this guy named Jordan Valerio, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He mixed it and it was incredible. Like I got the mixes back and I was like, this is amazing. Like what he took, because our live mixes were great too. Don't get me wrong. But there was something to me, and I guess to the band more than probably to the fans, because the fans hear it one way and then that gets stuck in their head. But to us, there was some things that I could hear vocally, and, this and that. And you're like, oh man, I wish I could just fix that or just make that sound a little clearer or better. Because you could just hear the live mic sound or, whatever, breathing too heavy or I spit in the mic, And so when we went back and were able to redo all the vocals, it just made me feel much better about that, typically just for like a studio release. And Toby did. And so when Jordan got it back, he was able to, in my mind, to maintain the live quality because the guitars and drums and all that were still live. He was able to maintain that energy but the vocals were a little cleaner and crisper, and which is what we wanted to hear. And so once I heard that, and we got a new master and all this stuff, and me and Matt were talking, we're like, man, we gotta do more than just put this out on Spotify in January and say, hey, check out our album. So then we started talking to labels. We talked to Tooth and Nail and Equal Vision. We were talking to Equal Vision for a while, and we even thought we were going to go that way, but it just didn't work out. No, nothing bad, just didn't work out. And so anyway, we're like, Tooth and Nail is great. Let's see if they're interested, and they were, and now we're on a team together.
Okay, so it's funny to me, like, when kind of going through that, because I almost thought maybe there was something that inherently felt that maybe it was more of a connection to this material. And I'm not saying that you don't have a connection to any of the other material in the independent years, but that there was something more that when you were writing this, that you're like, this just needs to be bigger than it has been the last couple of years. Like, I didn't know if there was an intangible thing that when you're making this, that you kind of all were like, we should try to go back to a label for this because it deserves that. So I didn't know if that was kind of the feeling as you were writing this that you felt. Yeah,
I mean, I didn't voice that, in the right way too. I mean, not only, was the mixes and quality and all that stuff improved, but that was the thing, obviously, with this writing process and the way that we recorded it live, it did. And not only that, but the way we had to write the songs in order to perform and capture it live. The style was different than it had been probably the last few records. And so we weren't able to write, nonstop vocals throughout the whole song, all the songs forever, because we had to remember the lyrics and remember your parts. And that's hard. If you're not
you hit them on that
we had to. Curtain. I mean, we thought, okay, well, that'll be cool for the vibe of what we're doing, but also we actually need them because we're learning the songs, that day or the day before. And so, that was part of it too, is that it made our songwriting, has a little bit more of a simplicity to it that we had probably not had done in a while, maybe, or obviously the energy was a big deal for us. And so having that energy in there with the live, I mean, I think that was a huge thing for Rub Some Dirt on It that we didn't have, for the past couple of records. And I don't think the songs are necessarily, I mean, I'm just in general, I don't think the songs are necessarily like head and shoulders above, albums we've done the past 5 years. Quality wise, but I think there's, like I said, I think the vibe and the energy and the way they felt and maybe the intensity of some of the lyrics, because these are about personal experiences or maybe traumatic events that we've experienced or gone through or whatever in our lives. And so I think that obviously bleeds through as well. So I think there is something more to the songs, depth wise, simplicity wise, and just the energy of the whole project, I think, made us realize, like you said, we need to put more effort into this, to get it out there.
What? I mean, obviously, like you said, you didn't necessarily have such a time constraint that you couldn't redo something if you needed to.
Right.
But what is the process like when if you can even kind of recall when you're in it, when the album recording is starting, that because there are times I was trying to look to see if because like I said, your lyrics were teleprompted in front of you guys so you could see them, and they kind of did the karaoke style thing where they're highlighted so you know where your lyric is and where you're at. But it was one of those that I was trying to look to either you or Toby mainly and just see if there's this sense of oh shit, okay, here we go. As you're looking at it and trying to do, play an instrument or be in time with everyone, if there's any of that nervousness that's kind of there because you're realizing this is going to tape. It's kind of a one take, and whatever you get is what you get. But it didn't seem like you guys really were feeling that from what I could see.
Well, I mean, I think that's what we were hoping for. I mean, we definitely felt it. I mean, 100%. I mean, before we started, we were all we were more nervous for that than we've been for any show or anything for a long, long time. And so there's something about capturing that live, even when we redid, the weeks in, the question, I'm Only Man, a similar feeling. Like we're like, okay, this is a one take deal. Remember your parts, play it. You're trying to capture that energy, and with Rub Some Dirt on it, it was one step further because these are all brand new songs that we had just basically written. And so, it was definitely there. I mean, we wanted to do our best to feel loose. You're trying to loosen yourself up. You make sure you're not too uptight, because that would take away from the recording as well. But there was a handful of times for sure that you missed your entrance or you missed a part and the camera just doesn't show that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all the cameras are there, but obviously we, edited to some degree to where maybe Josh was supposed to scream and he forgot his entrance, or I probably missed a couple harmonies and Toby missed some, so it wasn't 100% perfect by any means. But yeah, the nervousness, the excitement was definitely there. But we tried to maintain a little bit of a fun, lighthearted, attitude during the process. Just otherwise we would just been too stiff.
I think something, that was nice to see, and I don't know if it's going to continue moving forward with the live show for you guys. I don't really think I've seen much come from the When We Were Young festival performances, but like I said, I didn't get into the band until probably like halfway through at the time the band's career. And once you guys had all kind of gone independent and been doing more of the house shows and so forth. But I was always intrigued when I finally went to go see you guys live that there's not two guitar players, even though there's like a ton of two guitar parts on almost every song on every album. Right. And I was always just kind of like, that seems weird that you wouldn't have the extra guitar player. And I understand it from a logistical standpoint of finances for touring, but it was still one of those that, like, especially once I like learned that you and Toby both can play guitar perfectly fine, right, and usually play bass, and I was like, well, couldn't one of you play bass and the other one play guitar, and then swap on whatever songs are easier for the other? Right, but it was nice for this record to see, to have the extra person and to have Matt kind of be an ancillary musician in and of himself. It has me excited to when you start touring that maybe that's what the band will be. And you'll kind of, for my first time at least, get to hear the band as it has always been on record, but not always been in a live performance. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, early on we had, two guitar, like I played guitar and Toby played guitar, and then we had Joel, our original bass player. And so we were a 6-member band, and we always had two guitars. Then when we kicked Joel out of the band years ago, we decided just not to add another member. And so, we're like, it's always, it's as much as the show and all that stuff, hanging out with somebody is the other 23 hours of the day, you're around those people. So we're like, man, we got something pretty good here. Let's just kind of stick with it. And it wasn't until probably 2011 or 12, we knew Chris from his band Surrogate, and he had played, in Number One Gun years ago and stuff like that. And so we just thought he had started working with us on some records and albums and stuff. And we're like, hey, would you want to play some shows with us? We could have, like you said, we would have a live guitarist rather than a pre-recorded Matt track. So, and it, like you said, I mean, it gives it more of a live energy, and it's obviously better, and we like that better. But again, there's some complications there's finances, there's things like that where that kept us from doing it for a long time. And so now that we do have Chris, he's played some festivals with us, obviously the live stream stuff, and so we're super comfortable with Chris and having him there, and he's super reliable, extremely talented. And so I'm excited this is our first multi-show leg of something other than acoustic since before COVID. And so this will be, we'll have to shake some rust off, but yeah, we're excited to be going out and doing some shows like this with Chris again.
Yeah. I mean, and that's always the funny thing sometimes, I sometimes doing this show, I don't know if you get it whenever you do the Bad Christian stuff or whatever, but some people will comment like, well, how did you not know this? And I'm like, so that's why a lot of times now I've become more forthcoming with like information. Like, I was not a fan of the band in the beginning. I only saw the band once I started dating my wife, and who was a really big fan. And like my history with you guys is only up to a certain point. And yes, you can do some backtracking, listening to records and so forth, but there's still, like I remember going to down to like shit, I don't remember, like Gary, Indiana or something like that, to go see you guys play at a random church. And it was my first time going, but I bought tickets for my wife because it's one of her favorite bands. And I remember looking over and I was like, I thought there were 2 guitar players. She goes, I don't know. So it was like one of those where it's like the difference in fandom right there of like,
right.
I'm kind of like, I thought, well, there's 2 guitar parts. I thought there's 2 guitar players. I remember in the old music videos that I've seen, there was 2 guitar players. Now I'm confused. Like, what's going on? And then the person I thought would know was just like, I don't know. I just like the music. And it's like, all right, that's fair. Like, so it's just kind of one of those that like, to me, when seeing the video for this come out, when it first came out, I was like, oh, okay. Like, hopefully that's not just a for the live streams kind of thing. It's actually moving forward, because I think it would be really cool to hear some of these songs. And I think it actually would allow you to play different songs you haven't been able to, because you have the extra person who can, and you can focus on doing the singing or the harmonies, or, Toby doing the bass playing or whatever. Yep. So I think it, from that perspective, as a fan of the band now, and from a musician standpoint, I think would allow you to play newer songs that you haven't gotten to. And that's exciting, because it's like, oh, when's the last time you got to hear insert whatever song?
Oh yeah.
Maybe for the first time ever. And so to me, that's exciting, because it makes things feel fresh again, 20 some odd years later.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, it's definitely for Matt too, because Matt has, it makes, I think what I've gotten from Matt now is he feels a little bit more free to kind of do some other things live. He doesn't have to feel like he has to stick to script, the whole time. Chris can cover parts that he just kind of does what he wants. So I think it's offers a little bit more freedom for us all, like I said, to play some different songs, and to have Matt not have to always do what he's always done,
I feel like it's funny, because I don't think of Matt as the kind of person that would, I mean, I know he likes new things, but I also, in the capacity of music, I feel like he would be like, well, this is what we do. I play these parts, and that's how they go. Oh
yeah. I mean, he's definitely, we have a format and we try and stick to it. And I'm probably more that way than Matt to some degree. But Matt he'll change it. He doesn't he's not improvising every night or anything like that, but he'll throw in something different, every now and then, and are like, oh, that was cool that you did that, change it up a little bit. So he's a little bit more open to those things, and I think that's good. So, but yeah, he and I are kind of the musical directors for the band. So we kind of, he'll do it this certain thing, and I'll make sure we got the set list ironed out properly. And, we kind of work as a team in that way.
How were okay. I haven't talked to anyone that was on the When We Were Young festival. Were you, as a performer being asked to play it, were you equally kind of like, there's no fucking way everyone's playing this?
Well, we're not actually on it this year. We're going to be on it next year.
Oh, I thought you were. Okay, okay. So I guess that's also the equally confusing thing. I thought it was over the course of 3 weeks this year.
Well, there's there's either 3 weeks or 3 days. I'm not sure, but everybody's playing. I think every day is the same or something. Is that right?
I don't know. That's sort of where I was going to go with.
Yeah, I think every day is the same bands playing over again. So I have we didn't get asked to this time, which is fine. Like, no big deal. We're playing some other festivals. You were on the So What festival.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
So
good.
What festival.
So we're playing some other festivals, and then part of a deal that we struck with Live Nation, I think, is we're playing Chain Reaction in Anaheim, California, versus a larger venue that we were going to play. So that, and they were like, hey, if you guys will do this for us, we'll put you on When We Were Young 2023. And so we were like, okay, that's fine. We don't care, whatever. And so anyway, but yeah, I'm kind of glad we're not playing this year, because it will be it will be out of control. It will be real bad. I promise. Like, festivals in general are a little disorderly, and it's just so much stuff going on. Like, I mean, we've played some good festivals that are run well, obviously, after years and years. But the first years for festivals are typically just, this is it's just a mess. And so everybody's trying to, ask questions to everybody. Nobody knows, so it's always like a little chaotic. And so I'm personally kind of glad we're not playing this year, because I know it will probably be pretty bad not like bad as in the fans won't have fun,
No.
The fans will have fun and the shows will be fine. But as far as being an artist, it'll be just insane. So I'm kind of glad we're going the second year.
It's funny because like having book shows and kind of having friends and knowing a little bit more of that side of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when it started getting announced, people were like, there's no way this can happen. Like just the initial announcement, when it was announced. And I started doing the math of time and I go, Warped Tour had equally, if not more bands. And I go, and they made it work. If you use the Warped Tour formula of taking like places that have like, we'll say like a shed, but then you utilize a parking lot to set up a couple of other stages, and then you split the main stage, quote unquote, in half like Warped Tour would, where like when that one band's done after their 30 minutes, boom, the other band's, sound checking, tearing down, loading up, and you just do that back and forth there in addition to the others. Like Warped Tour proof of concept is there with Warped Tour. You can easily do it, or any of the other traveling fests like that used to exist. You can easily do it. Mm-hmm. And I go, and even if you, and the part where I kind of was like, I think the naivety of fans is that they see all of those bands and some of their favorite bands, you might be like, I'll just trying to think of someone else that's on it, but like, I'll just use you guys for an easy example. No disrespect to you guys, but it'd be like, if someone was going and you're one of their like 5 bands, they're like, I'm going because of you guys playing, and they assume you're going to play like a headline set. That's not realistic.
No.
And there's things like that where I think fandom of a band that they're going to see, they assume they're going to get a headline set out of that band. It's like, no, you're probably going to get a 20, 25, 30 minute set out of that band. Yep. Here are the clear cut headliners. They're going to get the, and even some of them might only get a 45-minute set. For then the bigger bands that are going to get like here's your main headliner, if and stuff like that. And that was the thing that was interesting to me, is that like when I would break it down and I'd be like, legitimately, you could get all these bands, you could make the time work. And I was like, here, it breaks down to this, 15 bands per stage, have 4 or 5 stages. Like it works. And then everyone's like, well, what about the changeover? I go, Warped Tour does the same thing. Like you can make this work, the drum set stays unless you need cymbals or a snare or whatever. It's kind of backlining and just using the same gear, get on, play, throw and go. And I go, it can work. But then when they started announcing the second date, the third date, and it's all the same bands, I go, now financially, that doesn't seem like it makes sense, because how do you route a tour with that many people in mind? And the thing is that still hasn't happened yet that I'm waiting for. And I think there are a couple that are going to be getting announced here soon, because I'm aware of a couple, is the package tours that route everyone there.
Oh, right.
Because some of those are going to be packaged together and then touring. Yeah. So then it's like, okay, how much does that end up tentatively hurting the draw eventually, where someone's like, well, I only wanted to see 3 bands and 2 of the 3 are touring together on their way there. Fuck it, I don't want to go and sell my tickets and go see them play a headline show in a smaller venue. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thing. I mean, that's why they have the radius clauses for festivals. You technically can't play within a certain amount of miles of, for however long. So, and you can't announce shows until after, so there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, like you said, it can technically be done, and the fans will probably have a good time. It'll be crazy, and it'll be fun, but for the bands and the artists, it is not fun. It's just not, I mean, other than seeing some buddies or something, it's just insane. So, I mean, Warped Tour wasn't fun.
No,
it was fun at the end of the day, when you're done loading everything a mile away from your bus, and, then you can kind of chill with your friends. But the rest of the day was awful for everybody. So same thing.
Yeah, I just did a preview for a local festival we have here that's actually done really well, but last year was their first year. And this year, like I'm excited to cover it as media because I don't have to pay to go, but it's one of those for me where I'm kind of like, and I know they're not going to listen, so I don't care. I can say this because it's in their fucking contract thing. So it's not anything they don't know, but it's one of those to me where, I've been spoiled because like one of the first festivals I got to cover was a Danny Wimmer festival. And like those dudes and gals have been running festivals for a decade plus at this point. So when I got to go, their shit's hammered in and out. They know what they're doing. They know how to like set everything up. They know how to run a festival.
Yeah.
When I went to the festival that's here last year, and even this year, there's no media area. There's not even a media area at all on the grounds. Like it straight up says in the PDF of like, okay, here's your coverage. Here's, how your day's going to go. Like DWP, when you got approved, they're like, hey, here's a PDF of every contact you'll need for any artist so you can contact them and reach out to them and try to set something up. We're going to send a PDF to all the publicists in case they want to reach out to you to set up something with their roster. That was awesome. I don't get that for this festival. I have to, if I don't have the contact, I got to go find it. Like I said, there's no media. And then half of the time when you go to a festival, like when I went to Sonic Temple, everyone was like, oh, that lineup was so sick. Who'd you see? And I was like, I think I maybe saw like 2 bands each day because I was in the media area trying to make the most of being available to talk to anybody. So I only got to see, other than the headliners, when literally there is no press happening, I only got to see a couple bands because I'm doing that. And then the few people I know on the package or whatever, I get to see them for 10, 15 minutes, but then they're tearing up and then leaving and getting ready to go to their next show. So it really is, from the behind the scenes perspective. It's like everyone was like, oh, it must be so cool going to these things. You're like, I mean, it could be. I don't know. Not from my perspective.
Yeah, it'd be more fun if you just bought a ticket and went and watched. And that'd be more fun typically. But yeah, they're hard work. But if they're run well, it's good. But you know when you have a good one and you know when you have a bad one, and it's pretty obvious pretty quick.
Yeah, financially, I don't know how this When We Were Young festival is going to be able to. I mean, I guess they're all sold out, but like I don't understand the hierarchy of the payouts of everything, because I'm like, that just seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to.
Too much.
I think bands have to take less money than they want just to be on it. You know what I mean? Like most of them. I mean, we've done that. You know, to get on Furnace Fest, you know, we took probably less money than we normally would. You know, because it's such a cool experience, and so you know that's pretty normal. Now, there's probably some bands that wouldn't do that, but many of the bands would for sure.
I was pleasantly surprised at how well Furnace Fest did. I wanted to go. I've never been. But it's one of those that's like right next to my birthday, but I'll be in Atlanta, so I'm not too far, I think, from where it actually is. So I maybe could divert and go for a day or so. But it was so crazy to see it, because it's like, you know, and I know you guys are in the field, I'll say, of nostalgia and tapping into that. Mm-hmm. And but it's one of those where, you know, I feel like I didn't think people would come out to that, because I felt like it was too many older people who haven't been associated or been involved in the hardcore or, you know, early metalcore scene or whatever. And so when they started bringing back all these bands, I was like, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if the old people that were around when all those bands, you know, playing some of the records that are getting, you know, the anniversary editions of things, I don't know if they like going to shows anymore. I don't know if they want to spend the money between babysitters, hotels, driving, all that. I don't know if it's worth it to them, because I see it more often, like, because I do this, I'm more involved in music than most of my friends. Most of them, when I'm like, hey, so-and-so is coming through, they're like, like they just don't care anymore. Right. So when I see something like a Furnace Fest coming, I'm like, do people care? Will people care?
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm glad to see it actually was really successful.
Yeah. I think there's, you know, there's enough within the scene, you know, that is still alive and maybe even resurged a little bit. There's definitely a resurgence happening over the past, you know, couple of years of this emo and indie scene. And so I think that's part of it. I think people don't want to miss out. You know, there's a lot of people who are still would never miss shows from their favorite bands. And when we were there, I mean, it was cool because it felt like a lot of people our age. It felt like there wasn't a ton of super young people, and, you know, there were some, but there was definitely, like, it felt a little bit more like a family or community. You know, it's like, oh man, you remember this? A lot of memories, a lot of nostalgia. And so I think that was what was so strong about Furnace Fest, is like just people holding on to those memories of some of their favorite bands from the early 2000s, late 90s, you know. And even us, you know, we felt like fans while we were there. I mean, the show was the most minimal part of our weekend. It was like, yeah, we're playing, that's cool. You know, a lot of fans enjoyed it, but as soon as we're done, or the whole rest of the day, we're going over to see, you know, Jeremy Enoch play, or Appleseed Cass, and you know, just all these bands that we haven't seen in forever. Some bands we haven't seen, you know, in a super long time, like Beloved, you know. So it was just super cool and fun for everybody, not just the fans, but for the bands and the crew. And I think everybody was just like, oh, this is amazing.
What was the trying to remember, God, I'm really bad with some festival lineups. I know they've been announcing next year's. Are you guys doing next year's as well?
No. So they're doing one this September, and we're not doing this one. I think probably 80 to 90% of the bands are different from last year. They're trying to, like, the turnover, keep that pretty fresh, so more people would want to come again. But there's a few that they're having back for sure.
Well, I was going to say, because like it seemed like there would be the announcement of the bands and the final lineup was announced, and then it seemed like right before so many bands were dropping off due to like COVID and stuff like that. So it was one of those where, and as some of these festivals are apt to do now, where it's like, like Blindside's playing and they're doing all of silence. So I could see with you guys having, certain anniversaries of records and so forth, it could be like, all right, I know you guys were here last year. However, this year you're coming and playing X record in its entirety. Yeah. So that's a selling point for you. So I could have seen you guys actually coming back on and doing something in that capacity, since I know that's a selling point to some people, even though you were there last year.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, that probably will happen in the years to come. I mean, I imagine we'll be hitting our anniversary years more and more, so, we'll be doing some of that stuff for sure.
Kind of speaking to anniversaries and obviously sort of as we're kind of wrapping up, the, with putting out a new record and still being ensconced in a lot of, these anniversary tours and playing these records in their entirety, too often you see bands as they progress in their career where either their mindset is, what's the point in putting out new music? The fans only want to hear, these 12, 15 songs consistently. What's the point of putting out a new record? Diminished returns, all that kind of stuff. What has there been a conversation in the band to where maybe you're like, I don't really need to put any new music out. We can actually sustain a career just on our back catalog.
No, I mean, we've never really considered it. I mean, we understand the nostalgia, and we can, continue and have success off of our previous records. And we know that, we're going to do more, live albums and digital events, with Shallow Seas and, some of our other albums. We're just going to do that. I mean, that's definitely on the horizon, but, we have our Emeryland community that, they're part of who we are, and they pay for new music and they pay for lots of different things that we do for them. And so not only because of that, but because we're like, if we weren't writing new music, we would probably just quit. I mean, we're not trying to just live off the past, forever. That's just not who we are. So writing new music and creating new art in a way is, part of the reason that we're still excited and want to do what we're doing. Otherwise we'll just get a little stale and probably just move on, and me and Toby will open an ice cream shop or something. Who knows?
Well, I was gonna say, like, it seems like, looking at the output right before you had left, like, it's crazy to think, to some people, someone, I forget who it was, the conversation we were having. It was when I was hanging out with the Atreyu guys, like when we were on their last tour. And Brandon was making this comment, and it really kind of shifted how I look at some bands, because he goes, we've been around long enough and have a diverse enough discography that spreads over, 20 some odd years. He goes, to some people, their record, like when they say, I hope they play old Atreyu, would be like, a Death Grip on Yesterday, or, things like that, like the third or fourth record moving forward. And it was one of those where I was like, I remember someone reading a tweet online from someone that was like, going to see Green Day with my kid. And she goes, I hope they play the old stuff. And the old stuff was American Idiot. And I was like, holy shit, like, that's not old. Like, but then I had to think about it. It's like, again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about, existing in a snapshot of when a record comes out. To me, American Idiot's still the new record, but it's like, no, that now is almost 20 years old.
Right.
And there was all the stuff that when I was growing up and in like, middle school and whatever, Dookie and moving forward, that it's like, there's a whole decade plus leading up to American Idiot that, is old to people.
Oh yeah.
So it's interesting to think back, like, in the last couple of years, you guys have put out almost as many records independently as you did when you were on like the major label system.
Yeah.
And to think about that some people could be like, I was only a fan, or I hope they play old stuff off of like We Do What We Want. That to some people, that moving forward is a band's career to them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely that. And I often say at shows unintentionally, I'm just kind of talking between a song or something, I'll be like, all right, we're going to play another old one. I'm like, I think they're all old now, up till the new stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. It's difficult to not kind of get stuck in that, but also, I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, that fans, they kind of come in when they come in, and we want new fans to, maybe we got some fans now that say, yeah, I first heard Emery on Rub Some Dirt on it. I mean, that's totally cool with us. And if they don't ever get into Walls, we don't care. I mean, they don't have to. So, we're fine with whatever, however they come about, and no offense taken, they like what they like. And that's just how it goes. That's why we keep writing music, hopefully capture some new fans.
It would be interesting to me to see if you ever do a re-record of We Do What We Want with you on it.
We probably will. Yeah, I mean, we'll probably do the live version style, just because that's typically the easiest way to do it now for us. Yeah. So, and I was on that record a little bit, just like backing vocals, here and there, and it was relatively subtle. And so, it'd be fun. Yeah, for sure. We could do some trade-offs, and it'd be a little bit more noticeable for me to be in there, but that'd be fun.
It was funny. I remember, I think Shovel Grass was the first single. And I remember getting a text from my wife. She's like, they sound like Esley Dying now. And I laughed before I even heard it, because I was like, I can't imagine what that would sound like. And then I listened to it, I was like, I mean, that's heavy. That's not Esley Dying heavy.
Right.
But it was just funny that was her frame of reference for me. It was just like, sounds like Esley Dying. And so I went in thinking like, oh, I'm going to hear blast beats and all this other stuff and be very surprised. And then when I heard, I was like, I mean, that is heavy, just not that heavy. Right. But it was funny that was the frame of reference. But as such, like, I've always kind of listened back to it going like, oh, it'd be interesting. Because I know you played that song and maybe one other one off of that record. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I know obviously since you've been back in the band, you've played some stuff off of it, but
yeah.
To have you be fully incorporated into it on being able to listen to it like on a DSP or whatever would be interesting to see where you then fit on the rest of the material versus the two songs you play.
Yeah, I think we will for sure.
Where obviously, the new record just came out again. Mm-hmm. Actually, tell me about that. How is that to plan to promote a record that's already been released once before and not that long ago? How was that process?
It was okay. I mean, we talked to Tooth and Nail about it, said, this has been released to our community primarily, and the general public who are fans that keep track of us. I mean, a lot of people, it's just the way it goes. People haven't listened to you since The Question, or they're like, oh, I didn't know you guys are still making records. So, I mean, it was a relatively small amount of people that had heard the record. I mean, now having it on Spotify, I mean, every day, since we've released the records, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know Emery was still doing this. This record's amazing. We have so much good feedback from it right now. And all these people who haven't heard it yet and didn't know we were even still a band. So I think it's nice to have those people, it kind of pulls them back in, when they get to hear it and they see it on, their social media or whatever. So that's cool.
And then you get to relive all the upsettedness. That's not a word, but it is now of the Eve album cover.
Oh, yeah.
People who didn't know that was coming out.
That'll never die.
Is it still, I joke about it. Is that still a thing you're catching?
No, I mean, not really. Occasionally somebody will make a joke about it, or something, but they know where we stand on it now. So it's most time people are like, whatever.
I remember talking to Toby before the record had come out, and I was like, I can't believe people are that upset about it.
Yeah, it was.
It just didn't seem. And then remember seeing when White Line Fever came out, everyone's like, oh, now they're talking about drugs, and I was like, all right,
that's funny. Yeah, we like to keep people upset about something. That just keeps it fun for us.
Well, maybe eventually, you know what? Whenever you guys decide to call it a day, you should put on the very last song. You should put a curse word in the song.
Oh, I'm positive that we will.
Just literally end it on a curse word and be like, there, you got it. Finally happened.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time. Where can everyone find you or anything you would like to plug online?
Oh, yeah. Just go to emerymusic.com, and, it's pretty much our new record. You'll be able to trace the new record wherever you want to listen to it. And we have a tour starting next week, Labeled Fest. We're going to be with Aaron Gillespie. He's playing his album for the Almost Southern Weather front to back acoustic, which will be super cool. Idle Threat, and we're going to be out with Norma Jean in August, and September, Oh Sleeper. So yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on. Go to emerymusic.com and you should be able to find what you need.
And when are you dropping another solo record?
I don't know. Whenever I get some time, 3 kids and all the other stuff going on. So not much time right now. So we'll see one day.
Fair enough. I know everyone was really excited for that. So I figured maybe there was other songs you've been writing, maybe that didn't make the cut. That would be the starting point maybe for the next one.
I got a few, and I'll eventually get back into it, but it's just whenever I get there, no big deal.
Well, fair enough. Thank you again for taking the time, and hopefully see you around these parts soonish. I think the Norma Jean tour is coming somewhat closest around here.
Cool. Yeah. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, John.
So that was my conversation with Devin. I want to thank him again for taking the time to talk to me. It's really fun kind of sometimes getting to know more about these people who you have in your life and that you've met several times, but you just don't have that one-on-one experience with to kind of know more about them. It was interesting too when thinking about talking to Devin is that he is in a unique position where he left the band, and to kind of come back to it where you're, having to learn the new things that the band guys have learned since, the record they put out before when you left and you had nothing kind of to do with it. Although that was interesting to learn that some of the songs had been in demo stages before Devin had left. I didn't know that personally. But to kind of get a differing perspective of a band that you helped start, what is it like when you leave and this thing still exists without you? But then when you come back, you kind of have to figure out what is it now? What has changed? How have the roles changed? I guess that's, like I said, it's something I've kind of really been thinking about a lot as a concept, is just roles and how we play them and how do they work and manifest in our relationships, whether it be working, personal, or whatever. And, getting to talk to Devin about that was fun. And kind of speaking to how you exist for other people. The band has been around for 20 some odd years. The people that listen to this band are adults now. They have kids. Some of those kids are old enough to start going to see Emery and so forth. And, being attached to someone's nostalgia, what is that like when you're still living your own life and still progressing as a person? These are kind of fun things to me to talk about. I don't know if they're fun for you to listen to, if you find these concepts or whatever as interesting as I do, but I thoroughly enjoy kind of getting to talk with people who are willing to kind of go down the rabbit hole with me with these things. So I want to thank Devin again. The band is out right now on their tour, their festival tour, basically. It's crazy to see this very ambitious project that they did. Really, if anything can be said consistently about Emery or the people that make up the band, it's that they are all super adventurous and take giant swings at life and in their personal careers. And it is one of those things that, as someone who sees it and sees kind of the personal side of things when they post about these things or talk about them on the podcast, you just can't help but be motivated to want to do the same. Just take giant fucking swings at life and just why not? You have the one life. Live it to the fullest. Take big risks. Take big calculated risks, I guess I should say. Going to start wrapping up with this episode, though. If you would like to keep up with Devin, you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at Devinantly. I'm probably mispronouncing that. I do find it amusing, though, as a handle. If you would like to keep up with Emery, you can find them on Facebook at Emery and on Instagram at Emery Official and Twitter at Official Emery. And if you would like to keep up with a link, there is one I put in the show notes. It's actually like a link tree type thing, which takes you to, it's not necessarily like a website. It seems like it's a new kind of website site thing. I don't know. I've never seen it before, but it looks, it's basically a website. It's just not through a www dot whatever or a Wix space or a Squarespace or something like that. It's like this new thing, which again, I'm not surprised since the band seems to always kind of be at the forefront of new technology, new things. It's sort of what Matt and I were talking about in our chat was like, what is this that you're using to do this? This is interesting. I always like to find out what the new stuff is so I can kind of be ahead of the curve or get, into new technology and new things. So it seems like the band is always pushing to do that. And is one that has figured out how to maintain and do things their own way throughout the entirety of their whole career, which is a very admirable thing in the music industry when you have sustained a career as long as the Emery guys have. But all of that aside, if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us simply enough, BREWspeak Pod, all the socials. If you would like to support us monetarily, you can go over to patreon.com/BREWspeakPod. We have different tiers. You get access to all the audio, all the video, all the episodes and the different iterations that they come out in, plus extra bonus content that I throw up there. Much appreciated if you do it. If not, no harm, no foul. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that's important. And last but not least, our podcast sponsors, rockabilly.com. Use our code BREWtally at the checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. Bean Bastard Coffee. Go support those guys and gals over there. If you live in the Buffalo, New York area, please go to the brick and mortar and support them there. It's great what they're doing in their local area. And last but not least, On Point Pomade. Use our code BSP15. Take 15% off your total purchase order at checkout. And for the BREWtally Speaking podcast, I am John. I'll talk to you all next week, where I sit down with my friend Damon from A Virtue, also the new guitar player of For the Fallen Dreams. That was a fun one. Can't wait to bring it to you. I'll see you all next week. Have a good one.